The year 2025 has brought an old and dangerous rivalry to a frightening new level. What was once a simmering, hidden struggle has now erupted into the open, sending shockwaves not only through the Middle East but across the entire globe. For decades the world has watched with unease as Iran and Israel circled each other, their animosity shaping the politics, security, and daily lives of millions. But now the stakes have never been higher, and the consequences of their actions threaten to spill far beyond their borders. In this new era, the shadow war that once defined their relationship has burst into the daylight, and the world is holding its breath, waiting to see what will happen next. For many years, Iran and Israel fought a secret war. This was not a war of armies clashing on open battlefields, but a hidden contest waged in the shadows, where intelligence agencies, covert operatives, and cyber warriors became the main combatants. The Mossad, Israel's legendary intelligence service, and Iran's powerful Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, played a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, each side seeking to outmaneuver the other through sabotage, espionage, and subterfuge. Their actions were rarely acknowledged in public, but their impact was felt in the corridors of power from Jerusalem to Tehran, and in the lives of ordinary people who often had no idea how close their countries were to disaster. This conflict happened in the shadows, far from the eyes of the world. In the dead of night, secret agents moved through silent streets, gathering intelligence, planting listening devices, and carrying out missions that would never make the headlines. Theirs was a world of coded messages, false identities, and constant danger, a world where a single mistake could mean disaster, not just for themselves, but for their entire nation. The public rarely saw the true face of this conflict, but its effects rippled through the region, shaping events in ways that were often invisible, but always significant. It was a war of spies, secret missions, and cyber attacks. In recent years, the digital battlefield became just as important as the physical one. Hackers working for both sides launched sophisticated attacks on critical infrastructure, power grids, water supplies, and even hospitals, seeking to disrupt daily life and sow chaos. These cyber attacks were often invisible to the public, but their effects could be devastating, causing blackouts, financial losses, and widespread fear. Meanwhile, teams of operatives carried out daring missions, from sabotaging nuclear facilities to assassinating key figures, always trying to stay one step ahead of their rivals. Both nations tried to harm each other without starting a full-scale, direct war. The goal was always to weaken the other side, to gain an advantage, but never to cross the line that would trigger an all-out conflict. Diplomats and military strategists worked tirelessly to manage the risks, drawing red lines and setting boundaries, even as they prepared for the possibility that those lines might one day be crossed. The balance was delicate, and the stakes were enormous. Every move was calculated, every action weighed against the potential for escalation. They used other groups, known as proxies, to fight on their behalf in countries like Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. These proxy forces, militias, rebel groups, and political factions became the front lines of the shadow war. Iran supported groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the Houthis in Yemen, providing them with weapons, training, and funding. Israel, in turn, launched airstrikes and covert operations to disrupt these groups and prevent them from gaining too much power. The result was a web of conflicts stretching across the region, each one connected to the larger struggle between Iran and Israel, and each one adding fuel to the fire. This long period of indirect conflict created deep mistrust and anger on both sides, setting the stage for a more open confrontation that would eventually erupt. In both Iran and Israel, generations grew up knowing only suspicion and fear of the other. Propaganda, media coverage, and personal stories all reinforced the idea that the enemy was always lurking, always plotting. This atmosphere of suspicion seeped into every aspect of life, from politics to education to daily conversation. Over time, the wounds of past attacks and betrayals became scars that were impossible to ignore, making reconciliation seem ever more distant. This hidden conflict, however, could not stay hidden forever. As the years passed, the number and intensity of incidents increased. Each new attack, each new revelation, brought the shadow war closer to the surface. Whispers of sabotage, rumors of assassinations, and hints of cyber attacks began to leak into the public domain, fueling speculation and fear. The world started to realize that something much larger was brewing beneath the surface, and that it was only a matter of time before the truth would come out. The tensions slowly grew, like a fire building heat. Each provocation, each act of sabotage or retaliation added another log to the fire. The atmosphere became charged with anticipation, as if everyone was waiting for the spark that would ignite a much larger blaze. Political leaders issued warnings, military forces were put on alert, and ordinary people braced themselves for what might come next. The sense of impending crisis was impossible to ignore, and the world watched as the situation grew more and more volatile. Small events added more fuel to this growing fire. Skirmishes along borders, mysterious explosions at military sites, and sudden blackouts in major cities all hinted at the escalating conflict. Each incident, no matter how minor, was analyzed for signs of a larger pattern. Was this just another isolated event, or was it the beginning of something much bigger? The uncertainty kept everyone on edge, and the sense of danger grew with each passing day. In early 2025, a series of bold attacks changed everything. These were not the usual covert operations, hidden from public view and denied by both sides. Instead, they were dramatic, unmistakable acts of aggression, carried out in broad daylight and broadcast around the world. Missiles streaked across the sky, airstrikes rocked major cities, and the world watched in horror as the conflict that had long simmered in the shadows finally erupted into open warfare. These were not the usual secret operations. For the first time in years, both Iran and Israel openly acknowledged their actions, making it clear that the rules had changed. The era of plausible deniability was over. The world's attention was now fully focused on the conflict, and the pressure on both sides to respond and to escalate grew with each passing hour. They were direct and public, marking a significant shift in the long-standing rules of engagement. No longer content to fight in the shadows, both nations began to mobilize their militaries in full view of the world. Fighter jets roared overhead, missile batteries were deployed, and soldiers took up positions along tense borders. The message was clear. The conflict had entered a new and far more dangerous phase, one in which the risks of miscalculation and escalation were higher than ever before. Suddenly, the shadow war was over. The world awoke to a new reality, one in which the conflict between Iran and Israel was no longer a secret, but a daily headline. The sense of uncertainty and fear that had long simmered beneath the surface now exploded into full view, as cities braced for attack and families prepared for the worst. The old rules no longer applied, and the future seemed more uncertain than ever. A new, more direct and perilous chapter had begun. Military leaders scrambled to adapt to the rapidly changing situation, holding urgent meetings and drawing up new plans. Tanks rolled through the desert, warplanes circled overhead, and the world watched as the possibility of a full-scale war grew ever more real. The stakes were higher than ever, and the risks of miscalculation or accidental escalation loomed large. The world watched with great concern as these two powerful Middle Eastern nations moved closer to a direct military clash, a scenario that international diplomats had worked for decades to prevent. The United Nations called emergency meetings, world leaders issued urgent appeals for calm, and ordinary people everywhere wondered if this was the moment when the region would finally tip into all-out war. The sense of crisis was palpable, and the need for a solution more urgent than ever. The shift from a covert or secret war to a more open conflict has made the entire Middle East a much more dangerous place. The region, already plagued by instability and violence, now faces the very To truly grasp the gravity of the ongoing war between Iran and Israel, we must first step back and consider why this conflict resonates so deeply across the globe. This is not merely a regional dispute, nor is it a simple clash of neighboring states. Instead, it is a confrontation with roots that stretch back decades, involving a complex web of historical grievances, religious tensions, and geopolitical ambitions. The stakes are not confined to the Middle East. They ripple outward, touching every continent and affecting the lives of billions. Understanding these stakes is essential, not just for policymakers and diplomats, but for anyone who wants to comprehend the world we live in today. This is not just a local dispute between two countries. The conflict between Iran and Israel is a flashpoint that has the potential to ignite broader regional and even global crises. Both nations are situated in a region that has long been a crossroads of civilizations, religions, and empires. Their rivalry is not only about territory or ideology, but about influence over the future direction of the Middle East, and by extension, the world. The outcome of this conflict will have major consequences for global security and the world economy. International leaders are acutely aware that any escalation could send shockwaves through financial markets, disrupt international trade, and undermine the fragile stability that has been painstakingly maintained since the end of the last World War. The interconnectedness of today's world means that a crisis in one region can quickly become a crisis everywhere. The Middle East is a vital region for global energy supplies. It is home to some of the world's largest reserves of oil and natural gas, and the stability of this region is crucial for keeping the world's energy markets functioning smoothly. The Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway between Iran and the Arabian Peninsula, is one of the most important choke points for global oil shipments. Any disruption here could have immediate and severe consequences for energy prices worldwide. A large-scale war could disrupt the flow of oil and gas, causing energy prices to rise sharply around the world. We have seen in the past how even minor tensions in the Middle East can send oil prices soaring, affecting everything from the cost of transportation to the price of food. In a world still recovering from economic shocks and supply chain disruptions, another spike in energy prices could tip fragile economies into recession. This would affect businesses, governments, and ordinary people everywhere, potentially leading to economic instability far beyond the immediate region of the conflict. Rising energy costs can lead to inflation, job losses, and social unrest. Governments may be forced to make difficult choices, balancing the need for security with the demands of their citizens. The ripple effects could be felt in every corner of the globe, from the largest cities to the smallest villages. Furthermore, this conflict involves nuclear ambitions, which raises the stakes to an incredibly high level. The mere possibility of nuclear weapons being used or even threatened introduces a level of danger that is difficult to overstate. The world has lived with the threat of nuclear war for generations, but the prospect of a nuclear-armed Iran, or a nuclear exchange in the Middle East, is a scenario that keeps security experts awake at night. Iran has been developing its nuclear program for many years, while Iranian leaders insist that their efforts are focused on peaceful energy production. The international community remains deeply skeptical. The secrecy surrounding some of Iran's activities, combined with its history of defying international inspections, has fueled fears that the country is seeking the capability to build nuclear weapons. It claims the program is for peaceful energy purposes. Iran points to its growing population and energy needs as justification for its nuclear ambitions. The government argues that nuclear power is essential for economic development and energy independence, especially as global demand for clean energy increases. However, these assurances have done little to ease the concerns of its neighbors and the wider world. However, Israel and many Western countries believe Iran is trying to build nuclear weapons. For Israel, the prospect of a hostile neighbor acquiring nuclear arms is an existential threat. Western powers, particularly the United States and European Union, have imposed sanctions and pursued diplomatic efforts to prevent Iran from reaching this capability. But the issue remains unresolved and highly contentious. Israel, which is widely believed to have its own undeclared nuclear arsenal, sees an Iranian nuclear bomb as a threat to its very existence. Israeli leaders have repeatedly stated that they will do whatever it takes to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons, including the use of military force if necessary. This has led to a dangerous cycle of threats, covert operations, and military posturing that has brought the two countries to the brink of war on multiple occasions. This nuclear dimension makes the conflict exceptionally dangerous. The risk of miscalculation, misunderstanding, or accidental escalation is ever present. International organizations and world powers have worked tirelessly to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons, but the Iran-Israel conflict represents one of the most serious challenges to these efforts in recent history. A miscalculation by either side could lead to a catastrophe with unimaginable consequences, not just for the Middle East, but for the entire planet. The use of nuclear weapons, even on a limited scale, would have devastating humanitarian, environmental, and economic effects. The world would be changed forever, and the lessons of history remind us that such risks must be taken with the utmost seriousness. The conflict also draws in other powerful countries, creating a complex web of alliances. The Middle East has long been a battleground for influence between global powers, and the Iran-Israel rivalry is no exception. The alliances and rivalries that shape this conflict are constantly shifting, making it difficult to predict how events will unfold. The United States is a close ally of Israel and has a strong military presence in the region. American support for Israel is rooted in shared democratic values, strategic interests, and a long history of cooperation. The U.S. has provided Israel with advanced military technology, intelligence, and diplomatic backing, making it a key player in any potential conflict. Russia and China have closer ties with Iran. Both countries see Iran as a counterbalance to Western influence in the Middle East and have provided economic, military, and diplomatic support. Russia has supplied Iran with advanced weapon systems and helped develop its nuclear infrastructure, while China has become a major trading partner and investor in Iranian energy projects. A war between Iran and Israel could easily pull these global powers into the conflict, either directly or indirectly. The risk of escalation is heightened by the presence of foreign troops, military bases, and competing interests throughout the region. Even a limited conflict could quickly spiral out of control, drawing in countries from around the world and threatening global peace. This could turn a regional war into a much larger global confrontation. The alliances and rivalries that define the modern world are being tested as never before. The decisions made in the coming days and weeks will shape the future of international relations for years to come. The delicate balance of power that has been maintained for decades is now under severe strain, and the actions of leaders in Washington, Moscow, and Beijing are being watched as closely as those in Jerusalem and Tehran. Every statement, every military movement, and every diplomatic gesture is scrutinized for signs of escalation or de-escalation. The world is holding its breath, hoping that cooler heads will prevail and that a path to peace can be found before it is too late. This essay will guide you through these complex issues. We will break down the key players, the historical context, and the current dynamics that have brought us to this critical moment. Our goal is to provide clarity in a situation that is often clouded by misinformation, propaganda, and competing narratives. We will explain the historical background of the rivalry, from the time when Iran and Israel were partners to the deep-seated animosity that defines their relationship today. The story of how two nations that once cooperated became bitter enemies is a tale of shifting alliances, revolutionary change, and the enduring power of ideology and identity. We will detail the major events and proxy wars that have marked their long struggle for influence. From Lebanon to Syria, from Gaza to Yemen, the Iran-Israel conflict has played out through a series of indirect confrontations, with both sides supporting rival groups and seeking to expand their reach. These proxy wars have caused immense suffering and instability, drawing in other countries and complicating efforts to find a lasting peace. We will analyze the current military actions of 2025, looking at the strategies of each side. The modern battlefield is not limited to tanks and soldiers. It includes cyber attacks, drone warfare, and information campaigns. Understanding these new forms of conflict is essential for grasping the full scope of the Iran-Israel rivalry. By breaking down this conflict piece by piece, we aim to provide a clear understanding of what is happening, who is involved, and what the future might hold for these two nations and the world. The stakes could not be higher, and the choices made in the coming days will shape the destiny of millions. Join us as we explore the history, the present, and the possible futures of the Iran-Israel conflict, and seek to understand the forces that are shaping our world.